Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast. We're excited you're joining us, and I'm very excited to welcome our guest today. This is Rachel Franco. She is from Atlanta, Georgia, and she is the founder and CEO of Fail Smarter. So I'm very excited to talk to you about this, Rachel. So tell us a little bit more about Fail Smarter. What does that mean? What are you guys working on?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So, in short, as in a day and age that requires companies and the leaders and teams within them to innovate more, where they're undergoing rapid, right, and I think continuous transformation, whether it's AI related or otherwise, and much more, right? Companies need the right kind of culture to fuel these, what I'll call seismic either shifts or activities, right? A
Yes.
culture that allows for experimentation, learning, and of course, you need and a culture that allows for failure, right? Because without failure, experimentation, or without an acceptance of failure, I should say,
Yes.
experimentation likely won't happen. And so that's what Fail Smarter does, that we work with leaders and teams and equip them with the culture, a psychologically safe culture, um, to I guess I'll say handle failure better. And then when to experiment and all that good stuff, and to we put the framework or the system to learn from those failures when and if I should say they inevitably occur. So in short, we help leaders and teams transform failure into greater innovation, adaptability, and performance.
Oh, I like that. And that's going to lead very nicely into our very first question, which is about psychological safety. So give us maybe, I mean, obviously you have very broad and deep knowledge about a psychologically safe environment. So share with us maybe just 1 or 2 ideas on how leaders can create a psychologically safe environment for their team.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I think, right, role model being vulnerable yourself as a leader, admit your own mistakes, your own uncertainties, your own failures. When you role model being vulnerable or, admitting those things yourself, you really give your team permission to do so as well. So that's one, right? Start role model, be a good role model. Also, be mindful of how you respond to new ideas, maybe even ideas that seem way out there at first, or to
Mm.
bad news. Because how you respond will really shape whether somebody's willing to speak up with an idea or willing to share that bad news. So really trying to approach or respond with curiosity, rather than judgment. Because what happens when we don't, right? You're not gonna, no one's
Shuts
gonna
it
want to
down.
rate, right? They're not gonna want to raise a new idea.
Right.
Forget innovation. And you want someone sharing, hopefully sharing a mistake or a failure when it's small, right? Rather than when it's grown to be really big and is now much more costly and expensive to fix or to resolve.
Right.
And I would just throw in one more, maybe I'll call this a bonus one, and
Sure.
that to measure it. I hear a lot, I'll talk to leaders and they'll be like, oh, I'm doing a lot of great things with my team. I think I have a really cohesive team, really high psychologically safe team. But I'd like to say, thinking you do and knowing you do, right, are 2 very different
Good
things.
point.
And so, right, measure it. There are ways to assess and measure it, one of which is the Fearless Organization Scan, which I offer, not to promote, but just offer.
That's okay.
But it's a really quick, I hate to say that it's quick but effective tool for measuring the level of psychological safety on your team. So then you can get a baseline of where your team is and either get confirmation that, hey, we are doing great, or identify some areas where, okay, we might need to work on this a little bit and let's figure out how.
Oh, I love that. And that's such an important part of so many different things, which is to measure it because
Yeah,
again, we have a bias, we have a perception, we have
yeah,
sometimes a false reality as a
yeah,
leader, and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes as the follower or a member of the team, we have a false perception of the leader. Either way,
that's true.
there are ways to measure, and I appreciate that, and that's a great point for all of our audience to really think about. All those leaders out there, think about how you're gonna measure and really determine as factually as you can how your psychological safety is going. So that's great. Awesome. All right. Question number 2. Rachel, obviously, any of us, and yourself included, we've had a lot of people influence us throughout our lives. If you were to think of one person that was especially influential, What's one word you would use to describe that one person?
Well, I know I had to think about I had a lot of people in my mind. I'll use a more recent one, I believe. I would say courageous.
Great.
Courageous. Would you like me to elaborate on
Yeah, I was just going to say, tell us how you arrived at courageous. You can reveal
courageous?
the person or not, either way.
I'll just say it's my former manager at my most recent role. And I use the word courageous because at the time I was making, I'll just say a late stage career change from the marketing communications arena into the learning and organizational development arena. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, for a manager, a leader, whatever you want to call them, to take a chance on somebody new. Right? Things move so fast, right? A lot of times we need someone who can maybe hit the ground running, or we all know it's expensive to onboard and train and someone new. And so I think it took a lot of courage for my former manager, Marla, to take a chance on me and hire me. When I, was making a change, I had gotten a lot of no's
Yeah.
and I appreciated her giving me that chance. I spent a wonderful 5 years in innovation enablement. And as part of that work, I did a lot of work around failure and learning from failure. And that's another thing I would say she was courageous in, is that she gave me a lot of white space to explore that. At the time, wasn't necessarily formally part of my role, but I started getting interest in the company. And I kind of created this little mini entrepreneurial venture within my role. And I think that was also courageous of her to give me that space to go explore that, as long as my work didn't suffer, obviously. But there's a through line between that and what I'm doing today, because I don't know that I would have arrived at doing Fail Smarter had it not been for Marla, one, taking a chance, having the courage to take a chance on someone making a career change, and two, give me the space and the freedom to go explore this area within that role.
Oh, I love that story. And I love the word courageous, but I love how the context that you provided with your story and your experience, because that is what happens. And it is, it's a little scary sometimes in late life, but I love the story that she helped inspire you to start Fail Smarter and to that courageous approach. So that's a great story. Thank you for
Thanks. I
sharing
don't
it.
know that every manager would do that, so yeah,
Yeah.
like, give her credit.
No, that's great. I appreciate you doing that. All right, question number 3. Let's talk a little bit about growth mindset. How can leaders foster and nurture this idea of a growth mindset in their team or even in themselves for that matter?
Yeah, well, can I answer that question? I was thinking about this question. Can I answer that a little bit differently? Hopefully it'll relate, but I wrote a LinkedIn post about this a while ago, actually, or something very related. And I like to say that most people think that a growth mindset, right, is about themselves, right? Am I capable of growing and changing? When I think one of the biggest leadership questions there is whether you have a growth mindset when it comes to others, specifically the people that you lead, right? In other words, do you believe that the people on your team are capable of growing and changing, or they are what they are, right? Because how you answer that question, I think, really shapes everything about how you lead, right? So if you've already determined that someone on your team is either not strategic or they're not cut out for this or that, right, they can't grow, then you're going to stop giving them, even if it's subconsciously, you're going to stop giving them those stretch assignments
Right.
or that tough
Yes.
feedback. And guess what happens, right? They don't grow because
Right.
in part you didn't really give them the shot because of that perception that you have in your mind. And you mentioned bias too, right? I think sometimes that can
Yep.
even be a bias, right, in and of itself, because really you were looking at them with a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so for me, yes, fostering a growth mindset does start with yourself, right?
Yes.
You got to really remain curious and a lifelong learner and committed to growing, but it doesn't stop there, right? It also means deliberately developing a growth mindset when it comes to the people on your team. So yeah, so I have a little exercise if I can just offer it up for those listening to pick somebody on your team and ask yourself honestly, am I treating them as capable of growing, or am I just keep treating them as, yeah, fixed, like, right, this is all they've got and they're not going to grow?
Yeah.
And if it's the latter, don't just try and think differently, but if you start noticing it, right, you first got to acknowledge and admit that you are. but actually take some action and give them an assignment that you might normally withhold.
Oh, I like that.
So a little bit different of a response, but I just think about that a lot in terms of I think it's common to think about how we develop it in ourselves and how we develop it in our team, but it also starts with how am I looking at my team? How am I
Mhm.
looking at them as if through the lens of a growth mindset?
Oh, I really like that because that's what leadership is. It is helping to empower those that you lead to grow and to do the things we've already talked about, the innovation, the creation, all of that. It all blends together. That's why all these questions are kind of connected,
Yeah.
is to be able to allow people opportunity to grow, to fail smarter, to steal your phrase here from your company there just a little bit. But yes, that's all part of the growth process, and we do as leaders, we absolutely have to allow people that space to grow. And I love that you pointed out at the very end, make sure that you not just think that you're allowing it, but you're actually doing it, because we all do this. The thinking and the doing, sometimes they're a little bit apart. And so
Absolutely.
we've got to make sure we get those as aligned as we can.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely. Totally agree.
All right, question number 4, emotional wellness. This is a hot topic of late, and by late, I mean the last few years, and rightfully so. How can leaders really maintain a really healthy emotional and mental wellness for themselves as they're engaging in a sometimes very challenging leadership position?
Yeah. Well, I think whether it's emotional wellness, quite honestly, or being a great leader, or really anything in life, I always say it all starts from within. I've done a lot of personal growth work in my life to get to know myself. So I think one is strengthening your self awareness and really getting to know or making sure that you know yourself inside and out so that you know kind of what are my emotional triggers or what causes me to do X, Y, or react in this way or react in that way or to feel this way or feel that way and then that way you can proactively create some strategies and have some tools at the ready beforehand
Before, yes,
too.
yes.
So first, I think it all starts with knowing yourself. I'm also a huge fan of self-care. I think sometimes we think of self-care as selfish, but it's really not, right? The more we take care of ourselves, the more we can care of others, take care of our team, be that great leader. And how can we do that? I'm a huge this is gonna sound so simple. I am a huge fan of just taking a walk, right? I really when I take a walk, if I have a problem at the start, by the time I'm finishing that walk, even if it's a quick one, my brain has already been starting to think about some solutions and what have you. Even if it's starting to think of new ideas for something, I think a walk is just so great on so
Yeah.
many levels, but even just a stress buster. So if you work at home, right, you can take a quick walk around your house or up your street really quickly. If you work in an office, just walk around your floor.
Oh, I like it.
Just getting up and moving. I think
Moving.
it's so helpful and it sounds so simple, but I think it's so effective.
I like
And then
it.
what was my 3rd one? I do have and then the 3rd one was just to seek out support. I ran a workshop, I still run it, but I ran it more so in the past around how to talk about failure with ease versus angst, and it was specifically geared toward leaders. And as part of the workshop, I broke the leaders into groups of 3 or 4, and they had not met before, by the way. And the exercise was so simple, right? They were to practice talking about failure and debriefing it, or sharing a failure and debriefing it. And it was such a simple exercise, but it always got such great feedback because it provided leaders with the opportunity to talk with other leaders about something they did not normally get to talk about. And that I think it does a lot for your emotional wellness, right? The minute
Yes.
you talk about something, don't we haven't you felt that where you're like
Oh, yeah.
immediately, right? You
It's
immediately
almost
feel
like group therapy,
yeah, right?
a little bit.
And I would suggest this back when I was in-house. I would try and encourage the leaders. I'm like, "You can continue this. Try and create a peer group of just even 1 person or 2 or 3 other leaders and, meet monthly or quarterly, whatever works for you, and, use that as have it be a confidential space and just have it be a time where you can get different perspectives, where you can share and discuss things that are going on in your professional life and this and that." So I think really getting that support from your peers is unbeatable.
Oh, I really like that. Great insight on how we can maintain some emotional wellness for ourselves. And that's just to talk it through with some peers
Oh,
that are in your same, roughly your same
yeah,
situation. So,
exactly.
all
Yeah.
right. Great comments. Rachel, our last question is it's kind of a fun one. Tell us a favorite baseball memory.
I can remember it at a high level, but it is a very fond memory. So my late grandmother, unfortunately, she's no longer living, but I think this is sometime in between. I don't know, 2005 and like 2010. I can't remember if the Braves were in the playoffs of the World Series. I just remember going over to my grandmother's apartment. She must have been in about her early 90s at the time. And for a couple of nights, we watched a couple of the Braves games, and I think they won. And what stands out to me about that story is that it was really kind of funny. I kept my 91-year-old grandmother up to about 12:30 or 1 in the morning. And on one hand, I felt so badly, but on the other, it was so much fun. And I kind of knew in that moment that, yeah, gosh, this is going to be one of those memories that one day I'm going to really remember. And I do.
Oh,
But
that's a
I'm a
great
little
story.
fuzzy on the details, but I remember just the keeping her up at night and just us having so much fun together.
Yeah,
Well,
and the details probably aren't as critical. You had a
that's
positive
totally
experience,
true.
and that's if obviously I asked this question not of all the guests. Some of the guests prefer the other question about the first job, but for those that do share a baseball memory, it's amazing how many times the story is not so much about the baseball game; it's more about the people that they're sharing it with.
No, that is so true.
It really is, and
Yeah.
it's a fun thing. You and I talked before we started the recording here about tennis and sports and just in general, how it can bring people together. It really is a fun experience. I know that not everybody is into sports, but for those of us that are, it becomes a very connecting activity for
I
us and
agree.
other people.
I
So,
agree wholeheartedly.
Rachel, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. How can people find you?
Sure, they can go to my website at www.fail-smarter.com. So www.fail-smarter.com. Don't forget the dash in between fail and smarter.
Very good. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who are tuning in to watch and to listen. We hope that these tips will not just be beneficial to listen or watch, but that you'll implement. So make sure you do that in our leadership journey. But thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.